Welcome guys to another video. This has been a very highly requested topic here in the channel and on the live stream, which is UVs. UVs are these things that we need to do for modeling and texturing so that we can add color and bake all of our maps into our props. And yeah, this is it. This is going to be the result of today's lessons. It's not going to be an easy lesson, but if you're going to be watching this, then that means that you really want to become a 3D artist and you're willing to learn all of the tricky and difficult parts of the process. I don't consider UVs to be as complicated as people make them seem, but yeah, today I'm going to be showing you the 5 steps that I follow to create this very clean UVs. Let's go. So let's start with UVs. What the hell are UVs? Well, in order for us to be able to texture this asset right here, we need to create a map that's going to hold all of those pixels and map them to specific areas of the mask. Now, we're not going to be using this mask a lot of any more times, don't worry. I know we've been using it quite a bit here in the channel, but this is a very good asset to learn about UVs because we have simple assets such as this buckle, we got the belts, we got this other simple asset over here, and then we got some very complex assets right here. And it's going to allow me to teach you some of like the things that you need to think about when doing UVs. Now, I'm going to show you the 5 steps that I do for UV mapping. And one of the first steps, this is not part of the 5 steps, but one of the steps that you need one of these things. This is called a UV checker map. Most softwares nowadays come with a pre-existing one, but I like using one of this just to understand the principle a little bit better. This is a very cool site. It's called uvchecker.vinci.xyz by Jorge Valle Hurtado. It's free, and you can download this. I'm going to download this in a 4K resolution. There we go. And here inside of Maya, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a sphere, so I can show you guys. And in this sphere, I'm going to assign a new material. It's going to be a Lambert material, just a basic material. And on the color, I'm going to plug in a file. And of course, that file is going to be the UV checker. If I press number 6 now, we're going to be able to see how this UV map is transferred into a sphere. The spheres will always have a little bit of distortion, so that's why we see it this way. But again, it's a good way to understand how these things work. So if I were to grab all of this low polys right here and assign the exact same Lambert material that I just did there, you're going to see that their UVs are completely messed up, completely messed up. So we need to create new UVs. Now, here are the 5 steps that I normally use to create my UVs. First step, delete UVs. So we're going to go UV and we're going to delete the UVs. We don't want to start with any UVs. We're going to start completely from scratch, and this is going to like ensure that all of our UVs are as clean as possible. Then I'm going to grab all of the elements and I'm going to do a UV camera-based projection and just hit apply. What this will do is it will create a UV based on the camera shape, like based on what direction the camera is currently looking at. And if I go to number 6, you're going to see that when seen from this specific angle, it looks really nice. The grid is very clean and very nice, but this is not a proper UV because if we rotate, you're going to see a very bad stretch over here. Now, why do I do this step? I like doing this step because it will create UV shells that you can see right here. I know they're a little bit difficult to see. Let's focus on the buckle, for instance. It will create a UV shell without any seam. It has no seams. It's just a projection that's going through the object. So this is very good because it gives us a clean UV without seams. Now that we have this, we can go on to the 3rd step. Remember, first step, delete UVs. Second step, camera-based mapping. Camera, not planar. Camera-based, so we get like a 3/4 view. This is important for a bug that sometimes happens with Unfold. And the next step is going to be to cut our UV seams. Now, Maya has an amazing tool. I love this tool. And this tool is called the 3D Cut and Sew UV tool right here. So you select your object, you go to UV, I'm going to go to number 5 so that we don't see the colors, UV, and we go to 3D Cut and Sew UV tool. And you literally just double click where you want to cut, like right there on the middle of the buckle. And then let's double click on here as well. And that's going to divide the UVs of this element into 2 different parts. Now, let's talk about like the main types of UVs that you're going to face. The first type of UVs is actually objects like this one right here. So if you're doing, I don't know, like a book, a TV, like the base of a chair or the top part of a table, and you get something like this, ideally what you want to do is you have 2 options. You can cut the front and the back, or you can cut the corners, okay? Now, for this asset in particular, I'm going to cut the corners because it's a very nice technique that you can learn. So I'm going to go UV, 3D cut, and we're going to cut this line here on the back, okay? You can see that we're getting this like interesting line right there. It's a little bit difficult to see, but it's right there. There we go. And if I were to go to UV editor, and I again check the UV 3D cut and sew UV tool, we should see, oh, we're missing one. There we go. We should see 2 different colors indicating that there are now 2 different islands. But if we unfold this border right here, it's kind of like if you try to stretch I don't know, like a wrapping on a candy bar or something, it's going to be very difficult to stretch that area because it's just this sort of like circular area. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this corners right here. And as you can see, when I double click, the selection automatically stops at that point because it doesn't know where it's supposed to be flowing. This is why retopology and knowing your edge loops and your proper modeling is so important, because if you have a clean model, then doing the UVs this way is going to be very, very easy. So as you can see, that way, we've now successfully cutted those corners. And it's very similar if you were in like primary school and secondary school and you were building this like dices or polyhedrons or whatever. They always had this little like flaps that you used to glue them with like a glue stick. Well, it's the exact same thing. We're cutting this so that when we unfold this, we get those sort of like little flaps, and the unfolding looks a little bit better. Some of you might be worrying about having all of these seams and later on in texture having a little bit of an issue. It's not an issue. There are ways to clean those seams in texture time that are not really going to make it difficult for you. So that's the third step. First step, delete UVs. Second step, do a planar or a camera-based mapping. Third step, cut your seams depending on where you are. I'm going to show you other examples in the next ones. And then the fourth step, unfold. You're going to jump into the UV editor. So over here, UV editor. You're going to right-click, select UV shell, select all of this, guys, and you're going to press Control U. Control U is a shortcut to, as the name implies, unfold. And look at this. This is the front view, a very flat, nice front view of this back part right here. And this is the back part of the other side right there. And you can see if we were to go to the element right here and we take a look at the grid right there. There we go. Look at how clean the UV looks. This is what you want to have. You want to have lines going from left to right, from top to bottom. You want to see the letters properly like facing you, and you want to make sure that you hide the seams as closely or as best as you can. In this case, back here on the part of this element. Yes, you can see that there's going to be a little bit of a seam right here from A1 to B0. But again, that seam, we can hide it very, very easily later on in the texturing process. So that would be the first type of elements. And this same principle applies, for instance, to the belts. The belts are just, again, symmetrical elements. So in this one, instead of having the corners selection, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go UV, 3D cut and UV tool, and I'm literally just going to cut, not in the middle, I'm going to go like on this one right here, which is like the bottom side or like the edge, because it's easier to hide the seams of a UV if they're on the edges. You can use edge wear, you can use a little bit of dirt, like there's tricks that you can use to hide the edges a little bit better. So I'm going to go on that one right there. I'm going to go on this one right here. And I'm going to go on this one right here. Careful here. Now, this elements right here, and that's a great example. This elements right here, as you can see, they're looping around. That means that this do not, like the side ones. This front one, that's perfect. That one works perfectly fine. But this side ones, they're not working perfectly because I did a C remeasure for this ones. And that's the problem with C remeasure. C remeasure sometimes will give you something called spirals. Let's go to 5 mode. So if I double click here, you can see by double clicking, instead of expecting this thing to go around nicely, it's going all over the place because it remeshed this in this sort of like spiral way. Is this the end of the world? No, not really, but it can be a little bit annoying. So to avoid that, first I'm going to try to find a seam, which in this case is this middle one. And as you can see, that middle seam right there, it's flowing all the way to this point and then it stops. I'm going to try to continue it and see where it stops. And you can see it really, like it's not flowing ideal. It's going all over the place. Now it's looking a little bit weird. Mesh display, let's do actually, let me go to the Lambert. It's looking a little bit, I don't know, like dark. Anyway, so as you can see right there, again, if we go to UV, 3D Condenser UV tool, this one is not really flowing the way I would expect. So unfortunately, when this happens to an asset, you might need to manually select the edges that you're going to be cutting. So for instance, I'm going to go to this center line right here. As you can see, again, this goes all the way around. It's really weird that it's giving me this sort of look, because normally you get this sort of like orange effect. And in this case, it's not giving me the orange color. Now, this one should be symmetrical. So as you can see, we get the same sort of like issue on this one right here. But let's go to this one. And again, I'm going to double click on this middle line. And you can see it flows nicely. It goes all the way until it hits that point right there. And then, as you can see, the other point is on this side. So the only thing I'm going to do on this one is I'm just going to copy or continue the line so that it matches and clicks on that part right there. Hopefully you can see the white line right there. Sorry about the shader. I'm not sure why it's looking like this. Usually it looks orange. So that one right there, as you can see, now has a front and a back view, which is what we want. I'm going to do the same thing over here. So double click. This thing is probably going to stop right around here similarly because it's a very like mirrored effect, and we just cut across. So every now and then you might have elements like this one that will require a little bit of that sort of effect. Now we just grab everything, Control U, and then that's it. We got all the straps. Strap, 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 and strap. And these are the ones that we're going to be like texturing as leather later on. That's all we need. No need to like make anything fancy just yet. So that is the fourth step. Okay, so it's again delete UVs, planar mapping or camera-based mapping, cut your UV seams, and then unfold. Let's go to more stuff. Let's finish the other elements before we jump onto the final step, which is going to be the layout. And this one, for instance, this is an object that has a hole in it, like a tube, like a can, like a, I don't know, like a barrel, for instance. For objects like this, again, you have two options. The easiest one, let's go UV, 3D cut, is just cut a line on the center and then cut a line on the outside, like that. And that's it. It's going to give you the front and the back. Very important that you cut both sides, otherwise you're not going to get the inside and the outside. So you need both sides of the element like that. And that's fine. If you want to be a little bit more specific about it, you could cut like another like circular side and it becomes like a tube. But to be honest, for this particular buckle, I think that's the best option right there. Let's go to the beak. The beak is a little bit more interesting because the beak already has an edge loop. All of these faces that are missing here that I purposely left out because we're not going to be using them, we're not even going to see them. All of these faces are just going to be hidden. Now, actually, like a couple of these faces are not even needed, like this 5 faces right there. Oh, careful not to select another face, because these faces are going to be hidden on the inside of the asset. So if you're not going to see them, you can model them. They're going to occupy extra polygon space and extra texture space that we don't really need. Now, this thing, as you can see, has an upper part of the beak and a lower part of the beak. So this line right here, this edge loop that, again, I consciously created when I was doing my retopology, is going to be very important because I can literally go 3D cut and cut right there on that border. See that? So it gets hidden in all of these lines right there. Now, make sure that to finish the loop, to make sure that that white line in this case goes all the way to the other side. And as you can see, as I double click, I know it's very difficult to see because of the shader. Let me try, there we go. But as you click, you're going to get the highlight going all the way around. And that's going to give you the cut that we're looking for. Actually, I'm going to go back here. I want to use this upper cut. If you want to erase a cut, you just control and double click. And that's going to delete the cut. There we go. So as you can see, that line right there is way, way cleaner. It goes through the whole beak and it's going to separate the lower part. And the lower part, even though it's curved, when it unfolds, it's going to unfold again very nicely. Same for the top part. We really don't need to unfold anything on the top part. We don't need to unfold all of these details here because they're very flat against the surface. So again, the unfold algorithm is going to solve all of those issues and it's going to give us the result that we're looking for. So that's it. Let me show you. If we go to UV editor, we grab this shell right here and we press Ctrl U. There we go. This is the top of the beak, and this is the lower part of the beak. Now you can see that there's a little bit of a cut here. Why? I'm not sure. But what we can do here is go to Edge, select these edges, and then go to the Cut and Sew, and just sew them back together. Same for this one. Let's sew them back together, and there we go. That looks a little bit better. We grab the shell again and Ctrl U, just so that it unfolds a little bit nicer this time. It was probably an edge that I forgot to deselect, and that's why it got like split again. So yes, it is very important to just give it a check on your island and make sure that everything looks nice. We're going to do a final check once we do the final step, which is again going to be the layout. Now this one right here is another tricky area, but again, thanks to the fact that we were very careful on how we retopologize and model our object, it's going to be fairly simple to create the cuts. So in this case, I'm going to go to this internal cut. As you can see, that internal cut pretty much goes around the whole object. It kind of like stops, it stops somewhere. Oh, right there. Okay, let's keep going here. It's really weird again, the shader. I don't have any lights or anything. So there you go. You can see the line going around. And what I want to do here is I want to sort of like divide the top part and the bottom part of the mask, because this mask is also hollow. As you can see, it's hollow on this side. So once I get to like around this point, like there's going up there. There we go. So we just continue it until it hits the border right there. And on the other side, we do the exact same thing. We go to that point, we just continue to this side, and once we hit this point, we just like reproject it to the side. So that thing right there is going to unfold pretty much all of that like top part into its own little element. However, it's going to be this sort of like weird T shape, right? And you can also see that up here, we got this shape that's a little bit difficult to unfold as well. So here's where we can apply something similar to what we did on the little back part, where we can separate some of this like frontal parts, like probably, for instance, this middle line right here. As you can see, this middle line is trying to go like really, really far out. So instead, I'm going to stop it right there. There we go. So we have that line that's going across and on the top of this thing. And that's going to, again, give me a little bit of a better flap to unfold everything a little bit nicer. Another thing that we can do is we can add, for instance, another cut right here in the middle. I know it looks very weird, and I know usually we don't want to have cuts there. But if we have a very big area, you're going to see in the layout section, actually, I'm not going to add it yet because we're going to use it on the layout section, but you're going to see it's going to be difficult to get everything where it's supposed to be. Now, finally, this thing right here on the high poly, it actually has a seam line going down the middle. So I'm just going to use that. The seam line right there down the middle to divide this like front part and this bottom part right here. So by doing that, if we again go to UV editor, we grab this thing and we press Ctrl U, you're going to see that we get, again, the little like flap, the little sort of like T shape, and then all of this mask shape right here. Okay. That's it. That's how Unfold works. That's what we do when we're trying to generate the UVs. Because as you can see, if we now go to all of our elements and we press number 6, all of them have really clean numbers. The grid and everything is just looking quite nice. But we're still not done. We still need to do the final step of the UV process, which is to lay all of these things in a single circle that we're going to be using to texture the whole thing. I'm actually missing a couple of pieces from this element, so I'm going to be doing them off camera. They're probably going to be seen on the thumbnail, but they work the exact same thing. It's just the cylinders that we're missing for the eyes. And the cylinders, they are cut in exactly the same way as this one. So you cut one side of the circle and then the other side of the circle. By the way, there's another video in the channel. If you want to look, there's like 5 best tips for UVs. It's pretty much the same thing that I'm explaining with other examples. If this is still a topic that you're struggling with, feel free to check that one out. Now, the last step is to grab all of this, go UV editor, grab all of the UV shells, and we're going to go to modify, layout, and there's a couple of options that we're going to change here. So the packing resolution is how like precise you want this to be. I'm going to go 1024 because I do want to have a little bit of a high packing resolution. I want to pack everything together. They shouldn't be overlapping. I do want to rotate all of the shells so that they're facing vertically. This is just personal preference. I like things to be vertical. This is very important. Shell pre-scaling. We're going to scale each shell. You can see that right now, the density that they have are very different. Like the beak has more resolution than the main area over here. And even the buckle has a lot of resolution compared to everything else. And ideally, you want everything to be in a very similar resolution. It's not going to be exact. Sometimes there's going to be a little bit of variation. But as soon as they're in the same sort of like range, you're going to be fine. So once we have that, I'm going to go here to the layout options. And on the layout options, I'm going to go down here to, preserve 3D ratios. This is again to make sure that all of the islands are scaled properly. Texture map size, this is going to be a 4K map. I'm going to go really extreme with this one. And I want to have 4 pixels at least. Sometimes I even go 8 pixels between each island. And I want 8 pixels from the border, just to avoid any sort of like overlapping, because one of the rules of UVs is you don't want to have overlapping UVs. And I'm going to say apply. If we do this, this is what we get. Look at that. So now every single shell has been aligned on this vertical axis, and all of them have a very similar like resolution. You can see right here, all of them are sharing a very similar resolution. Here's where, like, again, there's always opinions about this, and hopefully I don't get too much flack on this, but some people are going to be like, oh no, your UVs have to be like perfect, like they need to be perfectly aligned and it has to be perfectly understandable. Well, some people, they do this manually. Once the scale is set up properly, one of the things that you can do is you can literally like just start manually selecting all of these elements and getting there and trying to save as much space as possible. Again, the important thing is you don't want your islands to be touching each other. Like there shouldn't be any overlap. Like this right here, that's risky because you might get some contamination between islands. Now, the Maya algorithm for Unfold is really good. Like what I showed you before, it's actually going to give you a very good result. If I try to get everything into a single square right now, you're going to see that I'm actually going to be struggling because the algorithm like really does a good job. I'm going to turn on the image so we can see. And this is kind of like playing Tetris, where you can start organizing all of your elements in such a way that it becomes easy to read. That's the most important part about a UV map, that if someone looks at your UV map, they're like, oh yeah, this makes sense. This is, for instance, the beak down here. This is, for instance, the bottom part of the beak. This is, for instance, a buckle. And you're gonna be able again to, like, if you do this manually, of course you're gonna be able to get a little bit more control over this. However, again, once you do this for many years as I have, you will have certain assets that are gonna be really, really complicated to deal with. And at the end of the day, as long as you can texture comfortably, it's fine. Like, it doesn't matter. It does look good on your portfolio, I'm not gonna lie. So if you can spend a little extra time on your UVs, go for it, because it's definitely gonna look good on your portfolio. One thing I do recommend, for instance, on these leather straps, I'm gonna try to get them all into one of the same directions, because I'm gonna be adding later on a leather texture, and usually leather textures have a pattern. So if they are going against the pattern, like against the grain of the pattern, you might see some like weird effects. So by having all of this in vertical and all of this horizontal, I know that's easy to deal with. Again, if you want to be like really, really perfectionist about this, I might even just like move this to the side and try to get this the straps in here, again trying to make sure that they follow the same sort of direction. One of the worst things that you can do here, and again it's very like a very common temptation that some of my students get, is they'll try to scale things. So if you just scale like barely like that, like just almost nothing, just to avoid a little bit of that like sort of like overlap, that's fine. Like I'm not gonna be against that, to be honest. But this is why, again, the algorithm works the way it works, because it becomes a little bit difficult to make sure that everything is super precise. So that's no overlap there. A little overlap there. Again, it's not gonna kill you. You might even, to be honest, just grab one UV point right there and just move it a little bit right there, and that's gonna save you. But yeah, as I was mentioning, I'm still missing some assets, so this UV map is gonna change at the end of the day for the final element. So, but these are the things that you need to take into consideration. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So this right here would be a good UV map. You look at the element, and it should look like this. It should look, all of the letters should be like facing the right direction. The density is very important. It should be the same density. One thing that I like to do to test this out is I like to go to my texture, and then I go to the like to the UV coordinates here. There we go. And you can repeat this UV like 4 times. There we go. So you can see more squares. And that way, if everything looks like symmetrical, if everything looks like it flows in the same sort of like direction, then that means that your UV is perfectly fine. For some characters, you might have multiple UVs. For some assets, you might have different UV sets. Like each part of the object might have its own UV element. But these are the 5 rules and the way in how you should tackle a UV for a complex asset like this one right here. I hope this video was helpful to you, my friends, and I hope you find the information useful. If you did and you want to support the channel, I recommend you to check our premium courses. We're going to have a premium course very soon about this one right here, a Marbles Designer course. We also have a Blender course where we cover all of the same things, like UV things for a game-ready weapon. We got the ZBrush course, we got the Maya course, where we also touch a little bit on UVs. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to learn. There's a lot of content to consume here in YouTube. So thank you very much for your support, my friends. I'll see you back on the next one.